Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
We head to the mythical town of Springfield in an episode of Father Knows Best, starring Robert Young, going back 72 years to January 18th, 1951. And the boy that Betty is sweet on, his family, is coming to visit. But the Andersons aren't, or I should say the female Andersons aren't real happy with the way the living room looks. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, we thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, and you know what that means. This is the 18th day of January, 347 days remaining in 2023. James Cook, the first known European to discover the Hawaiian Islands in 1778, he named them the Sandwich Islands. 1788, the first 736 convicts banished from England to Australia landed in Botany Bay, 1788, creating the first Australian penal colony. Georgia joined South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama in seceding from the U.S. On this date in 1861. The X-ray machine exhibited for the first time on this date in 1893. Teddy Roosevelt, the president, sent a message of greetings from a Marconi station built near Wellfleet, Massachusetts, to King Edward VII of the UK in 1903, marking the first transatlantic radio transmission originating in the U.S. 1911, Eugene B. Ely landed on the deck of the USS Pennsylvania, stationed in San Francisco Harbor, marking the first time an aircraft landed on a ship. President Woodrow Wilson, on this date in 1918, delivered his 14-point speech in front of Congress in World War I. In 1919, Bentley Motors Limited founded. In 1958, Willie O'Ree, the first African-American National Hockey League player, made his NHL debut with the Boston Bruins. 1964, plans revealed for a magnificent structure in New York City, the World Trade Center. Also in 1964, on this date, the Beatles popped up on the Billboard magazine charts for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, convicted on this date in 1967 of numerous crimes, sentenced to life in prison. Premiering on television on this date in 1974, The $6 Million Man, and in 1975, The Jeffersons. 1977, scientists identified a previously unknown bacterium as the cause of the mysterious Legionnaire's disease. 1983, the International Olympic Committee restored Jim Thorpe's Olympic medals to his family. 1990, former preschool operators Raymond Buckey and his mother, Peggy McMartin Buckey, acquitted in a Los Angeles, California court of 52 child molestation charges. In 1990, Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry arrested for drug possession in an FBI sting. Eastern Airlines shut down on this date in 1991 after 62 years of service, citing financial problems. And in 1993, for the first time, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday officially observed in all 50 United States. Passing away on this date in history, President John Tyler, President 10. Also, British writer and Nobel Prize laureate Rudyard Kipling, actor-comedian Curly Howard, Sidney Greenstreet, whom you hear us frequently air broadcasts of The New Adventures of Nero Wolfe. He died in 1954. A number of illnesses. He was not in good health, even when he was doing The New Adventures of Nero Wolfe. Also passing away on this date in history, Edward Farhat, the original Sheik. Sergeant Shriver, the father of Maria Shriver, and the politician, diplomat, ambassador to France in his day. Singer, songwriter, guitarist, actor, Glenn Frey. The heat is on. Such a wonderful man. Coloratura soprano, 35 years with the Metropolitan Opera, Roberta Peters, and actress Yvette Mimieux, all passing away on this date in history. Birthdays that we celebrate today include statesman Daniel Webster, author A.A. Milne, comedian, they didn't get a whole lot better than Oliver Hardy.
Not only are you friends, but I noticed, for instance, whenever I spoke to Stan personally in the cabin before and after the interview I did with him, whenever he talks or refers to you, he doesn't call you Oliver or Hardy. That's right. You're babe to him, and that, I think, typifies your relationship and friendship.
Well, it's a funny way that I got the name of Babe. That was years and years ago, and then I had my first shave. So the barber went in, and he charged a dime, and he put some powder. He says, "That's all right, baby. You'll clean." So that name has stuck ever since.
From a 1950 interview with Oliver Hardy. Oliver Hardy, born on this date in history, of the great team Laurel and Hardy. Also born on this date in history, Cary Grant, Kurt Flood, David Ruffin of the Temptations, and the great Danny Kaye, who talks about his preparations to be in the motion picture The Court Jester.
I had never held a sword in my hand in my whole life. And when we decided to do this film, they said, well, let's get a fencing instructor and find out, teach you how to fence. Well, for about a week, I never had a sword in my hand, but they had a wall and a 2x4, and I would practice lunging. You see?
A 2x4?
Yeah. There was the wall. Here was a wall, and they put a 2x4, and you had to stay in it. Now, if you lunged and bent your back, you'd be thrown off balance. So you had to learn to lunge with a straight back. And for a week, I never had a sword in my hand. And then finally he came in one day, and we had a foil. And we were practicing routines with the foil, and we were doing that for about a week or more. And one day he came in, and he put a sword in my hand, and I knew instantly it was my weapon. It was a saber.
Many great roles for Danny Kaye, born on this date in history. Happy birthday number 82 to the man who sang about honey and the straight life and many other things. Bobby Goldsboro, 82 years old today. Although you know him best probably as the $1 Million Man, you should see some of what he did in Mid-South Wrestling under Bill Watts. Ted DiBiase, 69 years old today. Actor Kevin Costner, 68. The Thompson twins, Tom Bailey, is 67. Wrestler, actor Batista, 54 years old today. And from How I Met Your Mother and Freaks and Geeks, Jason Segel is 43. Those some of the people celebrating the 18th day of January is their birthday. Now, if this happens to be your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say... Happy birthday to you.
And from 72 years ago today, January 18th, 1951, Robert Young, Father Knows Best. That's coming up next on this Wednesday, Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox here on your favorite radio station. Classic Radio Theater family, you know our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop by just creating the best pillow. He created the best bed sheets ever. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me because, I'm working like 67 hours a day. Now, Mike's offering the best deal on his Giza Dreams bed sheets ever. You can get a set of Giza sheets for as low as $29.98. You'll never want to sleep on anything else once you slept on a set of Giza Dream sheets. A special offer for you right now. You can get a set of Giza sheets for as low as $29.98. Call 1-800-928-4715. Use the promo code Wyatt. Or go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Wyatt. It's good on anything on the website. That number again, 1-800-928-4715. Use my promo code Wyatt. Thanks for spending part of your Wednesday with us here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now we go back to Thursday, January 18th, 1951, 72 years ago today, for an episode of Father Knows Best starring Robert Young.
Mother, is Maxwell House really the only coffee in the world?
Well, your father says so, and your father knows best.
it's Father Knows Best, transcribed in Hollywood, starring Robert Young as father. A half-hour visit with your neighbors, the Andersons. Brought to you by America's favorite coffee, Maxwell House. The coffee that's always good to the last drop. In the third act of Romeo and Juliet, the fair Miss Capulet comes up with a dilly. Was ever book containing such vile matter so fairly bound, she asks. You know what she meant? Don't judge a book by its cover. That's all. Well, in Springfield, in the white frame house on Maple Street, the Andersons aren't quite as flowery as Juliet. But they're going to be given a treat just the same in the fine art of judging books and other things. Like this. Margaret, I'm home. Margaret!
But I had to, Mother. There wasn't anything else I could do.
What's going on in here? Didn't you hear me call?
I'm sorry, dear. We didn't know you'd come in.
Hello, Hi, Daddy.
Hello. I've been standing in the hall for 10 minutes screaming my head off.
Well, we seem to have a little problem.
Father, I couldn't help it. Really, I couldn't.
What did she do now?
She's in love, Kathy.
Mush. That's all it is. Just plain mush.
Never mind, Bud.
Margaret, I may be a little dense, but since when does Betty falling in love constitute a problem?
Father.
She changes boyfriends like I change my socks.
Jim, the problem is not Betty's new boyfriend.
Well, Kathy just said...
I said she was in love, and she is. Why don't you mind your own business? I do. I mind everybody's business.
Mush. That's all it is. Mush.
But if that's the most you can add to the general conversation...
Well, holy cow, Dad, I'm hungry.
Well, we'll have dinner in a very few minutes, but not until your father knows what Betty has done.
Done? You make it sound like I robbed the bank.
Has she?
Father.
And stop saying father.
Jumping creepers.
That's better.
Jim.
Honey, give me the horrible details of Betty's latest crime, and let's eat.
She invited the Van Nortons to Sunday dinner.
Fine. Now, if it's... Who?
The Van Nortons.
The Van Nortons?
The Van Nortons.
What did she do that for?
I told you, Father, I couldn't help it. She thinks he's gorgeous. I do not. Oh, you told Janie Liggett he was. I never did.
Kathy?
Oh, you did, too. You took the phone into the hall closet, and you thought I couldn't hear. And you told Janie, Mother.
All right, girls, that'll be enough.
But, Father...
I said that'll be enough.
Daddy.
Yes?
She said he was gorgeous.
Mush. That's all it is. Mush.
Look, as long as we're getting into this thing, let's start from the beginning. Who is gorgeous?
Roger Van Norton. Only I never said he was. She did, too.
Kathy, you stay out of this.
Yes, Daddy.
When I want you to tell me something, I'll ask you.
Yes, Daddy.
All right.
But she did.
Margaret.
There's nothing very complicated about it, Jim. Roger Van Norton and Betty have been seeing quite a bit of one another at school.
He has a convertible.
Well, if it isn't complicated, what's the problem?
It gets complicated later.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Betty invited Roger to dinner.
Well, only because he said he thought it'd be nice.
I see. He's the subtle kind.
He's a drip.
Mother, if you don't make them stop...
Bud, when you have as much money as the Van Nortons, you can't be a drip.
He's a rich drip.
He is one of the nicest boys in the whole school.
And he's coming to dinner.
With his family.
And his convertible.
That's the part I don't understand.
The convertible?
The family.
I don't understand any of it.
It wasn't my idea, Father, about the family. He said he thought it'd be nice.
What would?
If we met.
I thought you knew him.
She means the families, dear.
Oh, not the convertibles.
We don't have a convertible.
That was a joke, Dopey.
What was?
What Dad said.
It was?
It was his kind of a joke.
Oh.
Well, now that that's all straightened out, may I ask just one more question? What's the problem?
Father, we just told you.
Look, let's make believe I just got back from a long trip into the heart of the African jungle.
Jim.
We haven't seen one another in almost 8 years. And I say, what's the problem? Now, what do you say?
Hello, Daddy.
Happy.
Well, he said we hadn't seen him in 8 years.
Jim, it's really very simple. The whole problem is the rose chair in the living room.
I think I'll go back to the jungle.
Father, you've never seen the Van Norton's house. It has a swimming pool and a tennis court.
I still don't
and
see...
6 bedrooms.
What's that got to do with the rose chair in the living room? Being repaired, isn't it?
They brought it back today.
All right. If they didn't do a good job, make them do it over.
Well, they did a wonderful job, dear. It looks just like new.
And it makes everything else look awful.
Wait a minute. You mean because we have one chair recovered, we've got to have the whole house done over?
Oh, no, dear.
Well...
Just the living room.
Now, just a minute. If Betty wants to invite the Van Nortons over for dinner, that's all right.
Bud.
I'm as broad-minded as anybody. Just because the Van Nortons are the richest people in Springfield, that doesn't mean they aren't as good as anyone else. They might very easily be.
The doorbell rang.
But when you tell me I've got to have the whole living room done over, well, that's carrying things a little too far.
Jim.
The doorbell rang.
As far as I'm concerned, the living room looks fine. And if anybody thinks I'm going to change it, they've got another thing coming.
The doorbell rang. But it just needs a little paint.
Bud, didn't you hear the doorbell?
Sure.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Betty shook her head.
Margaret, I don't know what's gotten into these children. I swear I don't. They don't even make sense.
I didn't do anything.
Bud, see who's at the door.
Why blame it on me? I didn't shake my head. It was Betty.
Jim, I think there's something you ought to know.
I think there are a lot of things I ought to know.
Father, promise you won't make a scene.
About what?
The decorator.
What decorator?
The one who rang the bell.
You sent for a decorator?
Mom, it's Mr. Worthington.
Oh, dear. Tell him we'll be right in.
Tell him to go away.
Jim, please.
Honey, I told you in the very beginning.
Betty, why don't you and Kathy go into the living room and entertain Mr. Worthington?
But I want to tell Father.
I'll tell your father everything he needs to know. Now, go ahead.
Come on, Kathy. Why don't we have everything painted black so it won't show the dirt? Stop touching everything.
Now.
Margaret, in the first place...
In the first place, Jim Anderson, you've got to realize that we have a definite obligation to our children.
I never said that we didn't, but...
And when the recognized social leaders of our town show an interest in our daughter, the very least we can do is make the best possible impression.
Well, sure, but...
For her sake.
Margaret... If we've got to get new furniture and repaint the whole house every time we want to make a good impression...
No one said anything about new furniture.
You said...
And no one mentioned repainting the whole house.
Then why did you call Worthington? He's the most expensive decorator in Springfield. He won't look at a job that's under $500.
Well?
You mean we're going to spend $500 on the living room?
It shouldn't be much more than that.
More? On one room?
Jim, you have no idea how expensive good painters have become.
Who's he going to hire, Michelangelo?
Of course, if you don't want your daughter to meet the right sort of people...
That isn't the point. I'm as good a father as anybody in Springfield. But $500 for one room? Why don't we do it ourselves?
Jim, that's ridiculous, and you know it.
Why is it? We can get a few cans of paint and a couple of brushes and have it finished in no time at all. What's ridiculous about that?
But every time you've offered to paint anything in the past...
This is different. We can all pitch in and help. $500. There isn't that much paint in the whole state.
Oh, dear. Now I don't know what to do.
Honey, please, as a favor to me, let's do it my way. Just this once.
You won't get tired right in the middle of a wall.
Of course not.
You'll use just the colors I choose?
I'll paint the room lavender and puce, if that's what you want.
I still think we ought to let Mr. Worthington...
Margaret, look, I won't even go into the office tomorrow. I'll buy the paint and some new brushes, and I'll spend the whole day doing just what you want me to do.
Well, all right, Jim. But remember, if you do one little
Margaret,
thing...
so help me, when I'm finished, you'll be the happiest woman in Springfield.
I hope so. Now, you'd better tell Mr. Worthington we've changed our minds.
We've changed our minds. I never wanted him in the first place.
Jim, if you're going to be difficult about it...
Okay, if that's the way you feel.
Mommy, Mr. Worthington says he has to talk to you about colors.
Your father's going right in. Aren't you, dear?
Yes. Into the Valley of Death marched the 600.
Who?
Never mind, dear. Your father's being funny.
Again?
I never saw it to fail. Anytime there's an unpleasant job, I have to do it. I never wanted the guy in the very...
Mother, did it work? Did he say he would?
Your father starts painting in the morning.
Oh, Mother, you're a genius.
Oh, it wasn't anything, really.
But how did you do it? Last time he swore he'd never paint another thing as long as he lived.
Well, it's very simple, dear. You just use the same thing that wives have been using on husbands for thousands and thousands of years. Child psychology.
Some things never change. January 18th, 1951, Robert Young and Father Knows Best here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We'll have the conclusion coming up following these important messages. Oh, and we'll also have a look at the news from this date in history. That's coming up next. Thank you for tuning into this Wednesday edition of Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We're listening to an episode of Father Knows Best starring Robert Young, as it was originally broadcast Thursday, January 18th, 1951. In the newspapers of that Thursday, some 72 years ago, these were some of the headlines. President Truman yesterday broadly sketched a new national manpower mobilization policy calling for voluntary measures first, then mandatory controls if necessary to distribute the civilian labor force where it will do the most good. The president said each individual will be expected to serve in the capacity in which he can contribute most to the total mobilization program. He set out the new policy in a memorandum to the heads of departments and agencies. Truman said recruiting, placement, training, and use of civilian manpower, including government employees, will be based primarily on voluntary measures. But he added, government manpower controls will be used when and to the extent needed to assure successful execution of the mobilization program. Dr. Carl T. Compton told senators yesterday a draft of 18-year-olds followed up by universal military service is the best choice among the evils of a crisis that will last a very long time. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology board chairman drew strong backing from Dr. Harold W. Dodds, president of Princeton University, who testified for the plan advanced by the Defense Department, quoting, "I favor it beyond all other proposals I have seen or have been able to dream up." The two education leaders were witnesses before a preparedness subcommittee of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The group is working on manpower plans in general and armed forces requirements in particular. There is evidence of strong dislike among its members for lowering the present 19-year draft age. The auto industry informed the government yesterday it was cutting 1951 production 20 to 30% below last year's record output of 8 million cars, or to somewhere between 5.6 million and 6.4 million cars and trucks. The auto producers announced their proposed cutback after National Production Authority Administrator William H. Harrison told them a shortage of machine tools probably would force them to cut back plans for revisions in 1952 models. Communist China turned down yesterday the UN appeal for a ceasefire in Korea. It proposed instead a 7-nation conference in China to work on the Korean War, Formosa, and other Far East problems. The Peiping regime insisted Red China must be seated in the UN before talks begin. Secretary of State Dean Acheson immediately rejected the counter-proposals. American forces at the UN laid plans for bringing up a resolution branding Red China as an aggressor in Korea. Red China's Foreign Minister Chow En-lai listed his demands in reply to last Saturday's ceasefire appeal by the General Assembly's Political Committee. Mobilization Director Charles E. Wilson declared yesterday that price and wage ceilings must be imposed with speed and forthrightness, a virtual announcement that federal ceilings are imminent. In a speech before the Poor Richard Club at a dinner honoring him, Wilson said voluntary controls will not work. He went on, the power of law must be invoked. It must be used for allocation of materials, for prices, rents, and wage. Whatever the causes for delay up until now, we must proceed with courage, speed, and forthrightness to adopt the controls which will ensure stability and fairness in our civilian economy. Joe Valdez owns a barbecue stand in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He pushed open a door to yell at his lone departing customer, "Thank you, come back." A few minutes later, the cashier, Jeff Gossard, told Valdez the customer had held him up and left with $234.95. And those some of the day's top news stories, as reported in the newspapers of Thursday, January 18th, 1951, on your radio, Father Knows Best, and we'll hear the conclusion next on this Wednesday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, right here on your favorite radio station. We mentioned at the top of the show that Sidney Greenstreet passed away on this date in 1954. Tomorrow we will hear Sidney Greenstreet in an episode of The New Adventures of Nero Wolfe from January 19th, 1951, 72 years ago today, The Case of the Calculated Risk. David Caffrey tells Nero Wolfe that he plans to commit murder tomorrow. Well, we'll hear about that tomorrow here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now the conclusion of Father Knows Best, starring Robert Young, January 18th, 1951. The Young Man with the Convertible.
There's an old Dutch proverb that says, paint costs nothing, such are its preserving qualities. Well, that's a fine slogan for the people who sell the stuff, but they better not mention it to Jim Anderson. It's Sunday in Springfield, and paint is a pretty sore subject in the white frame house on Maple Street. At any rate, it's going to be very shortly.
Like this. All right, Bud, shove the couch a little toward me. Okay, that's fine. Now, does that cover it, Kathy?
Yes, Daddy.
How about the spot near the fireplace?
We'll hang a picture over it.
We used up all the pictures for the other spots.
Well, we'll get another picture. Are there any left in your room, Bud?
Nope, or in yours either.
I don't know. How could one small child make such a large mess in such a short time?
I don't think it looks bad. I kind of like it.
When your mother gets back, well, I hate to think of it.
I didn't know it wasn't the same color paint. It said green.
Why didn't you just leave it the way it was?
I don't know.
I'll bet we've got more pictures in our living room than anybody in Springfield.
When the Van Nortons get here, they won't know if this is the Andersons or the American Museum of Art.
Maybe Mommy won't notice it.
Now, there's a brilliant thought. Maybe if we stand in the middle of the room and put lampshades over our heads, she won't notice us. Where are you going?
To get a lampshade.
Come back here. Then keep your hands off the wall.
Yes, Daddy.
You know, Dad, I still think it doesn't look too bad, if you like pictures.
I like pictures as well as anybody, but I still think we ought to be able to see the wall.
Daddy.
Oh, it's all right, kitten. I'll explain the whole thing to your mother.
I better get out of here.
You stay right where you are.
But I just remembered a date I forgot.
Well, forget you remembered it.
Jim, we got the loveliest flowers.
Oh, that's fine, dear. We're in this together, and we'll stay in it together.
Father, is the blue vase in the living room?
Yes. Practically everything's in the living room.
May I stand in back of you, Daddy? Please?
Now, no one's going to hurt you, Kathy.
Jim, you have never seen such beautiful flowers in your... Jim.
Now, just take it easy, honey, and I'll explain the whole thing. You see...
But you better grab some of these before they...
sit down, Betty, while I tell you what happened. You see...
My living room. What have you done to my living room?
Well, why don't we think of it as our living room? Then it won't hurt you.
Mommy's gonna spank me.
A half hour. I haven't been gone more than a half hour, and look what you've done to this room.
Oh, Bud, how could you?
Me?
Just because you don't like Roger Van Norton.
Oh, Kathy, stop it.
All I did was carry pictures and move furniture. Why blame it on me?
Kathy, please. Now, will someone please tell me the meaning of this art gallery?
I was just trying to fix it, Mommy.
She made a little smudge, Margaret. That's all she did.
A smudge?
With her basketball. So she got a can of paint to touch it up. And that made another smudge.
You mean in back of each of those pictures is a smudge?
Well, not exactly. Some of them are drips.
Well, you know what it means. We'll have to do the entire wall over.
I know, honey, but we can't do it today. And I thought while the Van Nortons were
We
here...
can't let them see this. Why, they'd think we were out of our minds.
I've got news for you. They'd be right.
I don't think it looks so bad. It's kind of cheerful.
The only boy in the whole school with a convertible, and you have to do this.
Bud, push the couch back where it belongs.
You won't like it, Mom.
Why don't we just leave everything the way it is? And then tomorrow...
There can't be a smudge that big.
No, but... Well, you see, I didn't know Kathy had the paint can on the chair.
Jim, you didn't.
Of course not. I stepped in it, that's all. But you see, when it tipped over...
You mean it's all over the floor?
Just under the couch, honey. But we can take care of that in...
Why didn't you hang some pictures on the ceiling?
Because the paint didn't splash that high. Look, it's only on this one wall, Margaret, and if you'll just listen to reason...
I've listened all I intend to listen. Kathy, take these flowers into the kitchen.
Yes, Mommy. I just wanted to help. That's all I wanted to do.
Bud, go up to the attic and get some more pictures.
More?
You'll find them in the box marked blankets.
But, Mom, if we...
And stop arguing.
I wasn't arguing, but if you put any more pictures... Holy cow.
Honey, don't you think we've got enough pictures now? If we put up any
We've
more...
got to balance the ones you put up. As long as you've got them clear to the floor, we'll have to put them clear to the ceiling.
But who looks at pictures up there?
The same people who crawl on the floor to look at them down there.
Well, all right, honey, if that's the way you want it.
Mother, they're here.
Oh, no, they can't be.
Let's all hide in the cellar, and maybe they'll go away.
What are we going to do?
Jim, you've got to keep them out of here.
Okay, where'd you put my shotgun?
Jim.
Well, you said...
Will you please let them in?
You just said to keep them out.
Out of the living room.
Oh, how do I do that?
Take them into the den. Take them anywhere, but don't let them in here.
Well, okay. Come on, Betty.
Mother.
Go ahead, dear. I'll be in just a few minutes.
Father, what if they go right in?
It's very simple. We'll just hit them over the head with a meat cleaver.
Father.
All right, Betty. Let's, smile.
I wish I were dead.
Well, hello. Hello, Mr. Anderson.
Hello, Roger.
Hi, Betty.
Come on in. No sense standing out there in the cold.
Oh, well, Mr. Anderson, we feel this is quite an imposition.
It's no such thing. Why, we've been looking forward to seeing you.
Go on in, Roger. No one's going to bite you.
Hello, Mr. Anderson.
Father, this is Roger.
You know, I had a sneaking suspicion that's who it might be. Glad to know you, son.
And I'm his old man.
I suspected that, too.
Well, now that we know who everybody is, let's go someplace and sit down.
Just let me have your things, and we can all go into the den and be comfortable.
Roger, why don't you help Mr. Anderson like a good boy?
Mom.
Oh, I keep forgetting. He isn't a good boy anymore. He's a young man.
Well, whatever it is, let's go sit down.
Mr. Van Norton.
Tilly, I told you in the very beginning I didn't want to wear these shoes. Oh, they're friends. They don't mind if I call you Tilly. Do you, Jim?
No, not at all.
My name's Jake.
Jake?
Well, if you want to be technical, it's Westbrook Sylvester Van Norton III. Horrible thing to hang on a kid, wasn't it? Everybody just calls me Jake.
Okay, Jake. The den's right in here.
My mother said she'd only be a moment.
Oh, that's quite all right, dear.
Oh, my feet are killing me.
What seems to be the trouble?
These shoes. Never had them on before.
Well, sit down. Take it easy.
Oh, that's a little better.
Dad, for crying out loud.
He thinks I'm going to disgrace him.
Jake has such a lot of trouble with his feet.
It isn't my feet, it's these shoes. Jim, tell me the truth. Would you have noticed if I'd been wearing my old shoes?
I don't think so.
There. You see, Rod? I could have been comfortable all the time. But no. I had to wear my new shoes. We had to make a good impression.
Well, Jake, if they hurt, why don't you take them off?
You mean you won't mind?
Of course not.
Jake!
Well...
holy cow, Dad.
Holy cow. Is he a holy cower?
Never stops. Is yours?
Chief Stable Boy.
Oh, brother, does that feel good?
Oh, Kathy!
I'm fixing the flowers.
Run upstairs and get my slippers for Mr. Van Norton.
Okay.
And put the light on under the coffee.
Okie-doke.
Jim, I love you like a brother.
Dad, Mom says she'll be ready in a couple of minutes.
Fine, Bud. Oh, I don't think you've met my boy. Mr. and Mrs. Van Norton, this is Holy Cow Jr.
How are you, son?
I'm pleased to meet you.
And this is Roger.
Hi. I know all about Bud. You hit 383 for Springfield High last year, didn't you? How'd you know that? Oh, I just happened to know it.
He just happens to know everything that has anything to do with baseball.
He does?
Roger's quite a baseball player himself, you know.
He is?
Turned down a contract with the Dodgers last spring.
He did? Not the Dodgers, Dad. It was just a farm club. Holy cow.
There, you see? What'd I tell you?
Jim, we ought to form a club. The Fathers Who Suffer from Holy Cows Incorporated.
Holy cow. Gee whiz. Why didn't you tell me, Betty?
I didn't know.
Betty, while the men are talking, why don't we go inside and see if we can do anything for your mother?
Oh, no. I mean, Mother doesn't want us to. She doesn't want us to. Really, she doesn't.
It's quite all right, Betty.
Oh, are we all set, honey?
Yes, dear. Everything's all ready. How do you do, Mrs. Van Norton?
How do you do, Mrs.
Mr. Van Norton?
Mrs. Anderson?
And, of course, this is Roger.
Hello, Mrs. Anderson.
Betty's told us all about you.
She has?
Well, it's awfully crowded in here, isn't it? Why don't we go into the living room?
The living room?
But you said...
It's all right, Jim. And I'm sure we'll all be more comfortable.
Well, it's all right with me.
You have a lovely
Come on,
home,
kids.
Mrs. Anderson, but we've seen of it.
Oh, well, thank you, Mrs. Van Norton. It's nothing pretentious, of course, but we like it.
I like anything as long as I don't have to put those shoes back on.
I hope you don't mind the smell of fresh paint, Mrs. Van Norton. You see, we've been doing a little redecorating.
The living room isn't quite finished, but I'm sure you'll understand.
Well, of course, dear. We've just been going through the same thing ourselves.
Nice looking room, isn't it, Tilly?
Gosh.
Oh, Mother.
Look, Jake, as long as we're going to be friends, I might as well tell you...
Mrs. Anderson, I'm going to ask you a very personal question, and I hope you won't be offended.
Why, not at all.
Have you ever heard of a decorator named Worthington?
Well, yes.
Matter of fact, he was here just a few nights ago.
That's what I thought.
But we felt that...
Mrs. Anderson.
Tilly, it isn't important.
It most certainly is. I paid Mr. Worthington $1,000 to decorate my living room.
Well, that's very nice,
And
but...
he did mine exactly like he did yours.
Oh, no! Ladies and gentlemen, this is Robert Young. Tonight I've been asked to tell you something about the American economic system. And that's rather difficult because what can I tell you about a subject like that? You are the American economic system. You're the flesh and blood and bone of a country that works better, plays better, and lives better than any other country in the world today. Farmer, merchant, butcher, baker, we ask only that you appreciate your magnificent past and recognize the infinite possibilities of your future. Write to Box 10, Times Square Station, New York City, for the free booklet, The Miracle of America. Learn how a great country can be made even greater by your cooperation. Thank you, and good night.
While the radio version of Father Knows Best was not Robert Young's vision for the show, it in fact was a fairly decent situation comedy. He did not want a situation comedy. He wanted a warm family show and much softer on the yucks. He didn't like the insulting of the kids. He didn't like a lot of that. So the show, when it went to television, became a much different television program than it was a radio show. So if you watch Father Knows Best on TV, you'll note the distinct difference. January 18th, 1951, Father Knows Best here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Hey, thank you for making us a part of your day. Thank this station, support their advertisers. It is their kindness and courtesy that allow us to be here each and every time we roll around on your favorite station here on a Wednesday. And remember, your kindness also extends to Mike Lindell. If you go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and use my promo code Wyatt, and you'll save a whole bunch of money getting some great products. I sleep on a MyPillow every night. I really do. Also, visit our webpage, classicradio.stream. There you can stream our shows on demand. You can learn about building a classic radio collection of your own. You can contact me there. You can find our social media links, and you can also buy me a coffee. That's another way of supporting this program. The Buy Me a Coffee money doesn't buy me coffee. Instead, it helps us acquire additional classic radio collections and helps us continue our distribution channels, keep them up and running. Have yourself a great day. Tell all your friends the greatest radio shows of all time are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.